Good morning, everyone. It is now 11:07 a.m. Calling the roll for the Monday, April 2nd meeting. Dale Miller. Nan Baker. Trevor McAleer serving as an alternate for Dan Brady. Mike Dever. Armin Budish.
Here.
Dennis Kennedy. And Rich Opry serving as an alternate for Lenora Lockett. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Minutes from March 26th. Any corrections? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Dever. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you. Public comment?
No public comment at this time.
Okay, let's get started.
First item is item BC 2018-195, Department of Public Works, recommending an award on requisition 42030 to Donnell Ford in the amount of $65,205, and it's for the purchase of one 2018 F-550 dump truck.
Mike Chambers of Public Works. This went out to 13 bidders. There was one return. This is replacing a 2006 dump truck for our Road and Bridge fund. It's a very heavily used truck. This one will be pushed back into our fleet, and it'll be used in some of our other divisions for lighter work that it can handle. And we're asking for your approval.
Thank you. Questions? Councilman Miller.
Do we have any information as to why we only got one bid back out of 13?
In all honesty, no. This is one of the things that we're coming back with a lot of times. The factory deadline was actually last Friday was the end of the factory cutoff, which is one of the reasons why we're walking this down a little bit sooner than normal. It could be something to do with that, but this is on some of our vehicles. I know with some of our police vehicles, we have a very hard time. We went out 3-4 times in the past to get people to bid.
Further questions? Yes, Councilwoman Baker.
Yes, thank you. And just for clarification, the capital or equipment account fund versus the special revenue fund, can you tell me the difference?
Sure. No, road and bridge funds are special revenue funds by nature. It should have just said road and bridge fund, so it's really not a capital. It's part of our capital within our road and bridge fund, our line item.
Okay.
Just for knowledge, so the Road and Bridge Fund, Special Revenue Fund, is that only for vehicles and equipment, or can that be broadly used?
The entire road and bridge fund structure is called a special revenue because it can only be used for a specific purpose, which is road and bridges. So they call them special revenues.
Okay.
So within that, it could be used for, obviously, road and bridge purposes, which this dump truck's for. Does that make sense? Or?
Let me just... So the $65,000 that was, I believe, planned replacement truck, is that when you have your budget, you have $65,000 set aside in the Road and Bridge Fund or Special Revenues Road and Bridge Fund for that purpose?
Correct. I believe we had, I want to say $450,000 set aside in our capital line item within our Road and Bridge Operations Fund. And this is part of that money that we have reserved. Yeah.
If I could, Mike
Yes.
Dever with Public Works. Mike, if you can just highlight also the other, like the sanitary fund, we have a budgeted amount for the sanitary for those capital replacements.
Sanitary is more of an enterprise fund, so once again, within their fund structure, we have up to $2 million for equipment and camera equipment and supplies as well,
Right.
vehicles. You get into the facility side, it's usually general fund. When you get into the police cars and things like that, that's our
Right.
general funds paying for that. Once again, it's within our operating budget.
Right.
So it's really has nothing to do with our capital projects. It's a capital line within our operating account.
Would you be able to put aside money for ridge and road repair as the same as you would for the $65,000 truck? Would it just come out of that, or is it categorized to know that this is trucks, this is whatever, or this is streets and roads?
Yeah, within our road and bridge, we obviously have our operations, and then we have our permissive taxes, which is the 5, the 750, and the new one now.
That's right.
Those are 100% capital, which we use for road and
Road
bridge
and
related
bridge, right.
projects. Within our operations, we have obviously our salaries and our commodities, and
Right.
within that, we have a line item for capital replacement for vehicles for our maintenance yards. And this is
Okay.
for our maintenance crews that are out there doing bridge work, and that's what this line item falls under.
That's what that would fall under?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. Now, on the facility side, we have our maintenance garage, we actually charge back for mileage.
Okay.
Within our mileage, we have an extra 10 cents we put in there for capital replacement. Different than what we're talking about now, but we do put a little bit of an extra fund on our mileage chargeback to kind of build up some cash to replace vehicles.
All right. Appreciate the explanation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-196. It's a two-part item, Department of Public Works. A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 42277, which will result in an award recommendation to Simplex Grinnell LP in the amount of $48,417.75, and is for the purchase of a fire alarm system upgrade for equipment at the Jane Edna Hunter Building located at 3955 Euclid Avenue. And B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Good morning, Tom Pavich, Department of Public Works. This item, we're recommending an award that's going to result in a purchase order to Simplex Grinnell. This is the purchase of itemized materials for the upgrade of the fire alarm system at Jane Edna Hunter. I believe it was last year we identified 2 buildings through a capital project, the first one being Board of Elections, and this one being the second, Jane Edna Hunter, that the existing fire alarm system was older, there was obsolete parts, we needed to move it to a digital platform. The Board of Elections project was purchased last year through the same process, resulted in a purchase order. This is for the Jane Edna Hunter building. The pieces parts include sprinklers, sensors, audio equipment, LED lights. It's going to tie into the existing Simplex Grinnell system that's at that location, as well as all other county buildings. The Simplex system is actually proprietary, so that's why we're requesting an exemption to go with Simplex Grinnell. Due to that, the pricing is the Simplex, they offered state contract pricing for this. And again, it's going to result in a purchase order.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just ask one
Yes,
question. to that.
please.
Sorry. Do we have our annual maintenance, how much it'll be after the new system is installed? The pricing, do we get that as we purchase this, or is this something that will come later?
This particular item with Tyco, this is just the purchase. The maintenance or repair for the Simplex system is actually done in-house by our electricians. It's all tied back to a master contract, I believe, that the sheriff manages, that where all the buildings are tied together. I believe it's with Guardian. So I'm not sure what type of price you're looking for, because something like this, it's actually done in-house, the repair and maintenance.
But it is tied into the master contract with Guardian, though?
Yes,
Is that
once
what's
it
presented?
is today, and once we do the upgrades, it will be still tied into that. This is just an upgrade of the actual system.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Next item, item BC 2018-197, Department of Public Works. It's a two-part item. A, submitting an RFP exemption, which will result in an amendment to a contract with Soundcom Corporation for preventive maintenance and repair on communication equipment at the Cuyahoga County Justice Center Complex. It's for the period November 1st, 2015 through October 31st, 2017, to extend the time period to October 31st, 2018, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $24,500. And B, recommending the amendment in connection with said RFP exemption.
Good morning, Tom Pavich, Public Works again. This item, we're just looking to amend the contract with Soundcom. They provide the preventive maintenance and repairs as needed to the Justice Center Complex. They maintain the judge areas, the chambers, multi-purpose room, as well as the Jail 1 and Jail 2 sound systems. So they do the microphones, audio systems, speakers, etc. Last time this was bid, there was no vendors. We're just looking to amend it to take it through October of this year. We intend on crafting a new bid within the next 2 to 3 months. We're taking into account all the dynamic changes at the Justice Center. We got the new Cleveland Police Building. We're converting part of the kitchen to a jail, so we may be adding additional equipment that wasn't previously identified in this, but we will include going forward to make those changes. The dollar amount's not to exceed $24,500. That's just to include, as the equipment's actually getting older, just in case, but I don't anticipate using all that this time.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Mr. McAleer.
The contract is 4 or 5 months.
Yes, it is.
And that's reason for the exemption.
That's correct.
Just, can you talk a little bit about the delay?
So there was a little hiccup on our side as far as starting the actual process late. It was late last year when I think, beginning of fourth quarter last year, October, November, when I think we picked up on this contract as being expired. We weren't sure if we were going to redo it, go out to bid. Then we, as we're diving into the Cleveland Police Building, and then I found out about the capital project for the kitchen to jail, and we just don't know if we're going to be adding equipment. So as opposed to going out to bid with unfinished specifications, that's why we're looking to amend this. That way, when we do go back out to bid in a couple months, we can have finished specifications.
Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you. That was my question,
Okay.
but as a follow-up, how do they get paid? If,
We've actually done no service since it expired. So we haven't done any work just because we know we can't.
all right, thank
So.
you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item is a two-part item, item BC 2018-198, Department of Information Technology. A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 42091, which will result in an award recommendation to Integrated Precision Systems, Inc. in the amount of $79,946.43. And it's for the purchase and installation of 22 surveillance cameras, video management, 1 application server, 34 access control devices, and 1 intercom system for the use at the urinalysis lab on the first floor of the Cleveland Police Headquarters. And B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Good morning, David DeGrandis from the Department of IT. As you know, the county is taking over the police headquarters facility. The first tenants to move in will be from the probation department that's housed at the Marion Building. In the basement of the Marion Building is the urinalysis lab that will be relocating to the first floor of police headquarters. This is phase 1 of what's going to be going on in the building. And this is phase 1 request for the urinalysis lab. The floors 2 and 4 will be taken over also in the near future. You'll see another item for cameras and security equipment for the rest of that building. The equipment that we're looking at is the same equipment that we've been using throughout most of our county facilities, and we're extending that to this facility as well. The access control system we use is called System Galaxy, and IPS is the only vendor in Northeast Ohio who is able to provide not only the equipment, but the support and maintenance for that equipment. And we're extending our existing access control systems, intercom systems, and camera systems into this facility. Last week, council had approved the maintenance contract, a 5-year maintenance contract for IPS. Upon 1 year of installation of this equipment, we'll conduct a true-up, and then this equipment will roll into that maintenance contract. So as we proceed throughout the county, recently we've taken other systems over that were at the West Shore Neighborhood Family Service Center. We're looking at other buildings that have standalone systems because they tend not to provide the level of security that we should have in those facilities. By way of example, if somebody became a threat to the county, and they had access to all those facilities, a number of those other facilities would have to, somebody on site would have to deactivate those badges so that individual would no longer have access. So.
Thank you. Questions? Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you, and as stated, this is a state contract?
This is state contract.
So this has already been vetted by the state?
That is correct.
If, just as for ease of reading these agendas, if
Yes.
you could include,
Okay.
and I see that 199 is also a state contract, that would make it easier to know that this has been vetted through the state and we're making those choices.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, Mr. McAleer.
Sure, I just have a process question. As Dave pointed out, I believe IPS is the only provider in Northeast Ohio that can provide this.
For the System Galaxy, the access control piece of it, and we've been using them before I started. They've been in place for 20 years almost, as I recall.
So just in terms of our wording, because we're the RFP exemptions, which is something that we've always talked about bidding out contracts versus when we can and stuff. would that fall under a sole source purchase then, if they're the only provider that can provide the service? Because I think sole source is, to me, a little bit clearer for people to understand instead of RFP exemption.
The access control piece is sole source in terms of there not being another authorized vendor in Northeast Ohio able to provide that for the access control piece. It's different for the cameras and intercoms. We can buy those, but the problem then is I can buy these chairs from 10 different vendors and there would be no issue because there's no network interface. When we're looking at a network system, an enterprise system such as we have with the cameras and access control and intercoms, it's not a sole source, but it doesn't make sense to have multiple vendors trying to maintain a system because then we also run into issues of responsibility. So if we have a server that we have cameras connected to from 10 different vendors and we have a problem, there's going to be 10 different vendors pointing their fingers at one another. So there's part of it is sole source. The other part is for when you're building a network, you have to have some continuity. And that's the rationale for the exemption for the other piece. It is all state term contract, of course, as well.
So can you just tell me one more time, what part of this purchase here is the only item that IPS can provide? The access control?
That's the access control. So those would be the brains of the system, the access control panels, and that's called System Galaxy.
I think too, then, I mean, because we're using the state term contract, at some point it was bid out by the state.
Correct.
I struggle with the RFP exemption language when, it could even be an alternative procurement because we're using a bid out from the state. It's just, considering everything else that's going on, I think when we can be as clear on the agenda that it's not truly an RFP exemption. It was bid out at some point. I think it's just easier for people to understand that.
Understood. We'll
it
make
was
those
publicly
corrections.
bid at some point.
We'll make those corrections within IT for that.
Just to follow up, I don't think it's really sole source because the distinction is they're the only provider in Northeast Ohio, but there are other vendors.
Correct. There might be some there's a mom and pop shop down in Columbus, if I'm not mistaken. The reason we stick with Northeast Ohio is for service and maintenance. We have an 8-hour response time if we have to rely on vendors either coming from Columbus, Cincinnati, or even Detroit, and then we have service issues. Whereas IPS has people downtown, our response time is usually within an hour of any service calls that we have.
Thanks for the clarification. I thought it was that they were the only vendor that could do business in this region, like this was their region.
In Northeast, this is their region in Northeast Ohio, correct?
Have we compared to the Cincinnati or Columbus individual, like in terms of costs?
We have not. We have not.
That was my question because it says in the background that it hasn't been bid since 2001.
That's what I believe, yeah, before.
So, I mean, I would just say that we should probably be looking at alternatives because this vendor right now knows that we're never pricing anything any different than.
And there are some items that we have a reduced below state term contract for servers and for some of the licensing as well. It's been identified in the packet.
And I believe the reason it goes on the way it does on this agenda is because even though it's bought off state term, we didn't solicit other pricing in accordance with what the rules were. That's why it's an exemption.
That's correct. If I may, Rich Opry,
Yes.
Purchasing Manager for the Office of Procurement and Diversity. With these items, they used to be separate. So you used to see RFP exemption, like the request to purchase something as a sole source or state contract first, and then you would see the award come up afterwards. The new computer system that we're using is compressing them together, so you're seeing them both at the same time. So to repeat myself slightly is that historically we'd wonder why we're seeing this item again. Didn't we already approve this? That's no longer the case. You're seeing them both side by side. So anytime it's not a fully competitive process, you will see the RFP exemption.
In addition, again, the council approved a 5-year maintenance contract with Integrated Precision Systems. So at this point, for this period of the contract, to go out for other vendors, and then we'd have other maintenance contracts with those vendors as well then.
If I may,
Yes,
for
Councilwoman.
ease of understanding when we're reading through that, if we could have a bullet of that history of understanding that it may not be full exemption, may not be, only maybe partly sole source, that would be, it would limit the questions and give more clarity to
Understood.
anyone who may be reading it.
Understood.
Okay. Any further questions? Mr. McAleer?
Sure, just one comment. I would be okay moving forward because of the time needed with the police headquarters, but considering that they aren't the only vendor that can provide this service, I would just request moving forward, we have a discussion about at least talking with the other potential vendors. I understand the 8-hour response time is important, but if someone's in Columbus, they could still meet that 8-hour response time, so.
And that's what we require by contract, and as I stated, the actual response time is usually same day, usually within an hour because of the various other clients they have in and around downtown and our other facilities.
Okay. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item is a two-part item, item BC 2018-199, Department of Information Technology, A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 42382, which will result in an award recommendation to Integrated Precision Systems, Inc., in the amount of $2,476.25, and is for the purchase and installation of access control devices on 2 ballistic doors on the first floor of the ballistic analysis area in the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Building, and B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Hugh Shannon, Medical Examiner's Office. This is a completion of a project that started last year. We installed additional doors when we expanded the firearms laboratory area. Those doors require, for accreditation purposes, to have them secured. Obviously, we don't want anybody just walking into the gun lab. The urgency on this is that there is an accreditation visit in the middle of this month, so we need to get this scheduled and taken care of before their arrival. We are utilizing the remains of the Grudadoria funds, which we use to build out the forensic lab, so this is not a general fund impact item.
Thank you. Questions? Yes. Councilman Miller?
I'm surprised there's any Grudadoria funds left. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
How much is left in that account?
At the time of this item, about $4,500.
So you're getting pretty low, because that was originally a very large account.
Waiting for someone else to screw up and seize some funds so we can have more, but yeah, this is about the end of it.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councilwoman Baker?
Again, this is a state contract that you're, I'm understanding this right, 199, yeah. This is a state contract?
So IPS is not, I think David just explained what the rules are as far as how they contracted with IPS, but I was not involved in that.
I can comment on that.
Yes.
Rich Opry from the Office of Procurement Diversity. This is a straight RFP exemption, so they're making the purchase to make the purchase.
Has nothing to do with the state?
No, not to my understanding.
Then I guess I will ask, why didn't this go out to bid? Just because of time, or?
Correct.
And how long has the door been, or the access, installation of access control device, how long has it been not operational, or?
Well, the doors were put in late last year in December. So we've been working to try to get this scheduled since then. I was just made aware a few weeks ago that the accreditation visit was scheduled. They don't always tell us when they're coming, so it just ramped up the urgency.
Okay. Do you have more to add to this?
Yeah. I don't know if this confuses things, but the procurement type.
You have to introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Dennis Sullivan, Department of IT. Good morning, members. The procurement type was listed as expedited exemption state contract. So they had a quote that had the state contract number on it from IPS. So in regards to how it was filed, but I understand process-wise, you're gonna say, I just wanted to make it clear that the quote came in that way.
There may be some documentation that I'm unaware of, but I know that this item was not fully processed and it's being presented as an RFP exemption.
That's right.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Dever. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is a two-part item, item BC 2018-200, Fiscal Department. A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 42179, which will result in an award recommendation to Cogsdale Corporation in the amount not to exceed $109,586.57 for software support and maintenance services on the famous financial management system. And it's for the period April 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2019. And B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
I can handle this.
Please do.
Dennis Kennedy with the Fiscal Office. This is a standard annual maintenance contract for our famous system. That's the accounting system of record. It's going through as an exemption, even though this company is really the only company that can provide this service because of the antiquity of the current system. Cogsdale is actually a company out of Canada. They've been supporting the famous system for years and years with the county. We were holding off trying to determine where we were at with the ERP system. This contract eventually will go away with the implementation and operation of the ERP system, but because we most recently revised the timelines, we wanted to make sure that we would have the correct contract dates in here. That's why it's coming through as an exemption.
Thank you.
Be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
When the ERP goes live on finance, is this contract going to go away immediately, or is there going to be a time where you're going to be operating both systems?
Councilman, I believe that we will operate the system in the background until we're 100% sure that all the operation systems related to the new ERP system are functional. We're not, because we're installing the system on a staggered or tiered basis, there are other implications once, even when the financial system gets operational, that we'll need to make sure, particularly we need to get through the year end to make sure that our year-end statements are going to match what we have in the current system. I would suspect the need for the maintenance on the system will be evaluated anywhere between 6 and 9 months after the system becomes totally live and we're satisfied with the operation.
And what's the current target date for the go live on the particular portion of the ERP that replaces the system?
Councilman, the current projected go live for the financial part of the ERP is September 1st. That could be subject to change because of some issues we have with document management, but tentatively right now, that is the latest date that we have set for operation of the financial system.
And if we decide that we would no longer need this contract at a date prior to its scheduled expiration, are we able to exit, or if we pass this, are we committed through 3/31/2019?
We do have a standard out clause in the contract, so we would be able to execute that. I believe it's 60 days. It's 30 or 60 days, one or the other.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. McAleer?
Dennis, do you believe this will be the last contract for this maintenance?
Besides hoping, yes, I do believe that it will be the last maintenance contract for this system. We do have to set up a data archive system so that all the old, we're still required to keep, we're not flushing all the data into the ERP system. We're not bringing in like 5 years of data, so we are going to have to devise a strategy to have this information to be accessible, but I don't think this particular contract will be necessary to do that.
And then I believe a couple years back, I believe you tried to bid this out and we didn't get any responses.
Correct.
Right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure because there's like one person that can still.
There's not
ma-
too many people alive
That can maintain the
that
system, yeah.
know this
Okay.
system.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Mr. McAleer.
Did the rates increase from last year's maintenance or is it the same, do you know?
I believe it's roughly the same. It may be a couple of dollars higher, but it's not anything significant or substantial.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item is a two-part item, item BC 2018-201, Court of Common Pleas, Juvenile Court Division A submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 41804, which will result in an award recommendation to Cuyahoga County Community College Public Safety Training Center in the amount not to exceed $115,000 for corrections basic training services. And it's for the period April 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2020. And B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Good morning, Sarah Baker with Juvenile Court. This is a new contract with Tri-C to provide training for our current detention center staff as well as any new staff that we plan to hire. We've had some issues in our detention center lately, and we felt that it was drastically important to get a new training initiated for the staff that are there as well as anybody coming in. We've actually not been able to hire anybody in anticipation of this beginning. We really wanted to have people start fresh. They were going to provide 27 hours for any of our current staff for the refresher training. And then for any new staff coming in, they'll do 137 hours of training for each of those staff going through. Part of the reason that we chose Tri-C for this training is that the Sheriff's Department uses them for their correctional officer training. So we thought that this would be a good program to try.
Thank you. Questions? Councilwoman Baker?
How many are involved in staff training? Did you say, or did,
How many hours?
know how many people? Oh, okay.
I'd have to double check on how many current detention center staff we have. I know we have a backlog of staff waiting to go through. I think we were waiting to hire at least 20 staff.
Okay.
So I think there'll be at least that many going through initially, but I'd have to double check on how many current staff we have right now.
I'm just curious per person, how much for 115,000, what it's costing us for each one to go through training? It's all the same training?
For the most part, a refresher training per person would be $100 per person. And for any new staff going through, it is $750 per person.
Okay, that's good to know. If I may,
Mm-hmm.
the contract ended December of last year, so we did, let's see, am I reading right? Okay, let's see here. 201. Wait. Reason for the exemption is the contract start date is late.
Technically speaking, I suppose that it is late because today is April 2nd and we have a start date of April 1st.
I see, okay. So that's the reason, okay. Got it, thank you.
Mr. McAleer?
Is this the first external training that the court has done for the DOs?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Great, hopefully it can make an impact.
We're hoping.
I have a question.
Councilman Miller?
Mr. Executive, to Ms. Baker or to Director Kennedy, could you describe what the detention subsidy fund is and how the money comes into that fund?
Excuse me, I do not have the details on that, but be happy to work with Sarah to get an explanation of that. Off the top of my head, I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
With your explanation, if you could also let me know how much money is currently in that fund.
Balance.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Comfortable moving forward.
Great. Are there further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-202, Court of Common Pleas, Juvenile Court Division, submitting an amendment to a contract with Kronos Incorporated for maintenance and support services on the Comprehensive Human Resources Management System. And it's for the period April 1st, 2017 through March 31st, 2018, to extend the time period to March 31st, 2019, to expand the scope of services effective April 3rd, 2018, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $43,630.06.
Sarah Baker, Juvenile Court. This is just an amendment to our current Kronos contract, which is our HR case management system. This funding amount is for just the annual maintenance plus the additional user license that we've added. The user license was only roughly $307, and the rest is the maintenance cost. The court is actually hoping that once ERP goes live, we understand that there's an HR component to that. So we're actually hoping that that new component in the new system will be something that we can utilize, and we're hoping that we won't need this contract going forward.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
Am I correct that we use Kronos not just in the courts, but in a lot of other places, including departments that are run by the executive?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And as Director Kennedy, are you in agreement that that the ERP contains systems that can replace the Kronos contracts?
Councilman, that's correct. We're looking at the next phase of where we're at right now is to look at the peripheral agencies outside of the executive agencies to see what applications can be initiated either immediately with implementation of the system, or we will devise a schedule to add those particular agencies on as we move forward. But we are aware of the Kronos issue in juvenile court and other courts, so we're going to look at that as part of the next phase of what we're doing.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is a two-part item. Item BC 2018-203, Office of the Medical Examiner, A, submitting an RFP exemption, which will result in an amendment to a contract with Dr. Charles Catanese for forensic pathology services, and it's for the period July 3rd, 2017 through December 31st, 2017, to extend the time period to December 31st, 2018, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $60,600. And B, submitting the RFP exemption, submitting the amendment in connection with the RFP exemption.
Hugh Shannon, Medical Examiner's Office. So over the past few weeks, we've been having these kind of trickle out to you. We've had a number of folks that we've had to hire to augment the general staff due to the caseload problem that we've been having due to the opioid crisis. So Dr. Catanese is a forensic pathologist who comes in and does cases on a extended period, a couple of weeks at a time, and then we pay him by the case. As you remember, some of the previous contracts that we've had coming through, we've been reducing the amounts once we did the assessment of who was able to spend what amount of time with our office. So now Dr. Catanese is obviously somebody who has been doing a great deal of work on our behalf. We've used the funds that we had taken from the other contracts to add to his contract. He's able to offer his services for an additional period of time. We've added some money from the medical examiner's lab fund as well. I don't want to have to keep coming back to you. I don't think that we're going to utilize the entirety of this amount, but we are losing both of our forensic pathology fellows at the midpoint of the year. So that's 2 doctors that will be leaving us. So I wanted to make sure that we were covered for the rest of this year. So I believe that this will be, there may be one more from one of the forensic odontologists, but I think this should be the end of our contracts coming like this.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miller?
How was it decided that 33,000 would be from the medical examiner's lab fund and 27,600 from the general fund?
Well, the general fund dollars were what we had taken from the other contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So we were estimating what his rate of work was, and to get us to a reasonable point by the end of this year, I added the rest from our lab fund to get us there.
And suppose you don't need all of this money.
Then I'll go back to the lab fund.
It would go back to the lab fund.
Right.
Okay.
Further questions? Councilwoman Baker?
Similar question. How do you know what amount would go back to the lab fund and what amount would go back to the general fund? And if I can follow up a question, the next time this will be asked, as you said it probably will be, will you have enough money in the medical examiner's lab fund to pay for it, or will it be coming out of the general fund?
I think we'll return it as we have it divided here. So if there's $5,000 left, 2,000 will go back to the general fund, 3,000 will go back to the lab fund. We'll share that. At this point, I can't say for sure one way or the other whether we're going to continue to utilize his services, whether he'll be available to utilize services, but we're carefully monitoring caseloads. I don't want to jinx anything right now. Things are relatively under control. Again, losing 2 doctors mid-year is going to put a dent in our ability to respond if there is a ramp up of casework. But we'll continue to monitor the situation. We'll obviously keep council and the executive informed about what we're seeing. And then if we have to make further determinations, we'll be back in front of you.
Just as a follow-up,
Mm-hmm.
the 2 that you're anticipating leaving, will that come out of your lab fund, or will it be a split as you presented today?
So the forensic pathologists are paid
Through,
they're here for a year.
okay.
So we budget that in our salary line items.
So no further requests would come if you were to replace them.
Well, it's a budgeted position.
Right.
So at the moment, we don't have any identified candidates for the rest of this year. We know we have one candidate coming in June of 2019. We budget for 2.
Got it. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Baker. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes.
Thank you.
Next item is a 2-part item, item DC 2018-204, Department of Health and Human Services, Community Initiatives Division, Office of Homeless Services. A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 42061, which will result in an award recommendation to United Way of Greater Cleveland in the amount not to exceed $28,350 for web-based housing listing services in connection with the Homeless Crisis Response Program, and it's for the period January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018, and B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Is there nobody here to speak about it?
Shari's not here. Would we like to hold the item, or is the board comfortable with it going forward?
I will ask the board that.
Mr. Chair, I just have one question, and I don't know if Bob knows the answer or not, but is this an annual contract that we have every year?
Bob Math with the Office of Health and Human Services. I believe it's an annual contract. It's just a web-based service, that United Way's been operating now for, goodness, probably 10 years or so. This way, landlords can, nobody publishing the rental suites in the paper anymore. There's not too many papers that come out every day. So now they can put it on the, on this web-based, people can access this kind of clearinghouse for really affordable housing.
And when I had asked about it last week, I was advised that as opposed to, I had asked, why not just look in the newspaper? And the comment was that this provides much more specific, directed type of housing, so that apparently a good number of landlords don't necessarily invite homeless people to come and rent from them.
Department of Development. And I made that comment specifically. This is a website that those with some sort of special need can go and see willing landlords who are willing to rent with them, whether they have some sort of disability, they have a voucher, etc. Not all landlords are as open. These are probably the most willing landlords, the most open ones to receive people who have special needs. So it's usually the first step that people take, as long as they have availability with one of those landlords. They'll like to go there. Otherwise, they are then left with kind of what's out there, the apartment.coms or other types of classified ads.
Councilman Miller.
I'm comfortable voting it out today.
Thank you. Any other? Then I will move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Miller seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you. Thank you both, Mr. Math and Mr. Surratt, for helping us out.
The next item is a two-part item, item BC 2018-205, Department of Health and Human Services, Cuyahoga Job and Family Services, on behalf of the Division of Children and Family Services. A, submitting an agreement with University of Maryland of Baltimore on behalf of the School of Social Work Institute for Innovation and Implementation in the amount not to exceed $219,026 to develop, integrate, and sustain best practices and programs to improve the well-being, stability, and permanency of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, and two-spirit children and youth in foster care. And it's for the period September 30th, 2017 through September 29th, 2018. And B, submitting a data use agreement in connection with said services.
Good morning, Karen Anderson, Division of Children and Family Services. This project was established by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, Children's Bureau, to look at ways to help serve LGBTQ youth in foster care. They're generally overrepresented in foster care, and so there has not been a sort of a national initiative to look at this. University of Maryland was awarded the grant from the federal government to become the National Quality Improvement Center. After their first year of operation, they issued a proposal looking for local child welfare agencies across the country to pilot different programs and ideas to improve services. So that was something that we felt was important in Cuyahoga. We've not been able to sort of break through and help kids feel comfortable identifying, or, I'm not sure what the issues are. And so this is a really intensive 4-year program. This is the first year that we'll focus on creating a system to help kids feel comfortable in identifying. We will also be providing a foster home network of both DCFS homes and our private providers for families who want to be affirming and care for kids who are LGBTQ. And then third, to do a permanency initiative to hopefully find those kids permanent homes when none have been identified. This grant was written in cooperation with Case Western Reserve as evaluator and the Waiting Child Fund, which is the only agency here in the state that does a blend of family finding and chosen affirming families. So the first step is to do this. I also received your question, Councilwoman Baker, about why are we starting this now? In the original grant proposal, University of Maryland sent a sample contract and asked us to comment on would there be things we'd need to change. Our law department reviewed that and said, yes, indeed, here are the pieces. So once we were awarded, Maryland, took, 6 or 8 weeks to give us our contract. When they did, law reviewed it and said, hey, only half of our changes are in there. And so it's been going back and forth, making sure that all of those things were incorporated. So that's the issue. But this will be an annual grant as long as the federal government continues this for the next 4 years. We'll be coming back. And the second part will be we'll be bringing our sub-agreements for Waiting Child Fund and Case Western forward after this.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you for that explanation. So this was going to be a year. It's now down to 6 months.
We have been working on this. Our partners have been doing it in good faith. So we have really been diligently working since October. And in fact, University of Maryland will be here Friday for a site visit.
Good. So you're on task.
We're on track. There were 4 sites chosen nationally. We're proud to be one of them, and there's a lot of attention about this project because it's the first time the feds have really sort of made a dedicated effort to helping this population.
Thank you. And just a clarification, this is a grant, right? Mm-hmm. How is it revenue generated?
They're giving us each year, it'll be the $219,026. Roughly $105,000 of that will be for DCFS staff, for the coordinator that is dealing with that, and as well as fringe benefits and materials that we'll need. And then the other $110,000 will be for Waiting Child Fund and Case Western for their portion of it.
So all the $219,000 will be spent?
Yes.
It's not any excess of money?
There will be no excess of money. Maryland knows they're expecting our bill.
Just a point of clarification, when we accept a grant and we spend the entire grant, would that still be called revenue generating?
Well, it's generating revenue now. When we accept a grant, it's always listed as revenue generating. And
okay, I don't remember.
Most of the time it's spent.
Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, Councilman Miller.
My first question follows up on Ms. Baker's question, which is that we accept hundreds and hundreds of grants for all kinds of different things, and I don't see them very often described as revenue generating agreements. How is this one different from all these other grants that aren't described that way?
I can take a stab at it. I think what we're asking is, typically a foundation will give a grant and there's not sort of a legal contract. The federal government, when you do federal grants, require agreements. And so Maryland, of course, as our we're their subcontractor, there is a contractual element. We're agreeing to deliverables and all of those things. So in that way, it's a bit atypical from a traditional grant. Does that help?
let it go with that. I have one other question, which is that I'm familiar about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, but could you tell me a little bit about questioning and two-spirit?
Sure. I thought about addressing that up front. The practice, for those who are familiar with LGBTQ sort of protocols, I find those letters are always changing, right? Sometimes it's LGBTQIAA, and but generally the Q is questioning. Sometimes it's queer, which some of us think is a derogatory term. In the gay community, it's not. Some people refer to themselves that way. But for those youth who might say, gosh, I really like, I'm a woman and I really like girls, but sometimes I like boy. I don't know what that means. We want to be able to be sensitive to that, train our staff to help them with that, and then get the appropriate clinical services. Two-spirit is the native term for folks who have different gender identities or sexual orientations. And because this is a federal grant and it was offered to tribal communities, Two-Spirit was included.
Okay. Now I know. Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. McAleer.
Karen, the backup material states that about 19% of foster kids refer to, or recognize themselves compared to the 3 to 8% nationally. Is that 19% high compared to other jurisdictions, or is that average? Do you have data that?
I think sort of common literature says 10% or so of the population will identify themselves as LGBTQ. In child welfare, national research has shown that it can be up to 19% because, of course, many parent-child conflicts, kids get kicked out of the home. I mean, all of those things and abandoned, often it's because of sexual orientation. We see this a lot in the homeless youth community. When we've done it in Cuyahoga County, and this is really the reason we wanted to pursue this, our state child welfare database does not have a field for sexual orientation or gender identity. So the only way we can do it is to go to workers and say, who on your caseload is LGBTQ? The first time we did it, we identified 3% of our kids in foster care. We did a lot of training, and then the second time we did it, it was down to 2%. So clearly, I don't know if we'll ever, my colleagues on this project say, we're going to get to 19% identification. I'm like, I would be real happy with 10, which is, it at least ought to be that, right? And so that's really one of the reasons we wanted to get this grant, because it helps us focus our efforts on creating an environment and a community-wide system with other partners to say, kids ought to be safe, and comfortable, and not be in a home where, if they're in our care and they're in a foster home, we don't want them to be bullied or mistreated. We don't have any indication that's happening, but we want to create an affirming environment.
Further questions? Yes, Mr. Kennedy.
Just a quick one. This says it's through their Institute for Innovation and Implementation. Does our innovation department get involved in any of this kind of stuff?
We have talked to PEI. We are working with, University of Maryland has their own evaluation team that's really comprehensive. We also are working with CASE to do some specific things that are beyond sort of the scope of what our traditional PEI teams do. So yes, we're doing all of that. They're aware of it. They're helping us think it through. They're helping us understand the data and all of those pieces.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any further questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
What is PEI?
I'm sorry, Performance performance evaluation and improvement. So it's,
Lots of initials.
Acronymitis.
Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-206, Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Children and Family Services, recommending an award on requisition 42310 and enter into an agreement with Court of Common Pleas Juvenile Court Division and the amount not to exceed $205,000 for community-based intervention center services for referred moderate to high-risk youth in Cuyahoga County. And it's for the period April 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2019.
Bob Math with the Department of Health and Human Services on behalf of Division of Children and Family Services. This is an agreement that we're entering into with juvenile court to implement something called the Community-Based Intervention Center Services. These are for youth that are in the custody of DCFS, that are also court involved, that are struggling in their home schools. They're being referred to juvenile court to provide, education and behavioral health services. In the past, juvenile court and DCFS had a joint contract with Appwood Centers to run a program which was called day reporting. That contract terminated. We elected to not enter into a new agreement with Applewood. Juvenile court decided they wanted to implement this in-house. The judges indicated they want to hire staff and train them. So we're now running this program over juvenile court as opposed to having this joint contract with Applewood. And the cost is remarkably, it's much lower. In the past with Applewood, we were paying roughly at $250 per day per child. The cost with juvenile court will be approximately $150 per day per child. So it's a substantial savings going forward as well.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
On to the exemptions.
Item BC 2018-207, Department of Public Works, recommending an alternate procurement process on requisition 42404, which will result in award recommendations to various providers in the total amount not to exceed $850,000 for the purchase of various building supplies to be used at the Cleveland Police Building headquarters and various other capital projects for a 2-year period to be determined. And I have a question for you, if I may. In the backup information, the requisition was 42404. When we looked in the system this morning, there's a requisition number that's 42402. So we just wanted clarification on which requisition number to approve today if this item is approved.
You check that one? Okay. Mike Chambers of Public Works. As you know, we just finished up our first alternative procurement process. And even though we went through it, we said it was going to be $200,000. There was a lot of $24,500 items, which is our mechanism to encumber the funds. And working in a little discussion with some members of the council team, we thought it best to come before you guys. And instead of doing the similar process, we're going to come back and do another justification, alternative procurement process. But this time we're going to award contracts rather than the not to exceed amounts that we had before. Let me back up a half a second before that. We finally have better numbers too. When we came to you the first time, we were kind of coming out of here kind of cold. We now have some more, definitive information on what it's going to take to finish up the police headquarters project, as well as we have just are taking on another project now with the jail renovation. We're going to turn that into some beds. So the total now is going to be $850,000. We feel that that's going to carry us through to completion. Once again, what we're asking for is the approval to do the bidding, the awarding, and the purchasing of various items. We're going to award up to 8 separate contracts. The last one was 6. We're hoping if we can take a few of the main items and maybe take those out and bid them separate, we might get some better pricing. So we're asking for approval up to 8. Right now, the most we're going to be asking for is $200,000, for some of those. And what we're going to do is we're going to work in combination with OPD, very similar to what we did before. We're just trying to speed up the total process. Usually it takes, I like to say, 2 months or longer. We're trying to get this done within 4 to 5 weeks if we can. So you've seen in the attachment how we're going to go ahead about doing this. We're going to work together. One of the key things is that we're going to release the bids and a contract together. So when they come in, we're going to have all the documentation we need to come back to you then and award. So that's one of the primary changes that we're trying to do this time and save some time. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Mr. McAleer.
Mr. Chair, if I can just add, council staff, Mike King, myself, Joe Nani, met with Public Works team last Wednesday or Thursday about this process. It will still be public out on the streets for, I believe, 2 weeks and a day. So any vendor can submit bids. It's just a condensed window in order to continue the progress at the Cleveland Police Headquarters. We recommend it coming first forward with the alternative procurement process in case there were any additional comments by the Board of Control, but we just thought wanted to make sure everyone knew it's still a public bidding process. The window is just a shorter timetable by 4 days. So,
Councilman Miller.
I just want to say thanks to the administration for being responsive to the concerns that I and others expressed about the $24,500 purchases.
Thank you. Councilwoman Baker.
And I too am grateful for that. The final $850,000, that's, you believe that you can wrap things up with that? Did I hear that correctly?
Right, we need about $700,000 we're estimating for the police headquarters, and then we're taking on another capital project coming up, which wasn't on our radar when we first came before you.
All that is inclusive?
$150,000 we feel should do the trick, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate coming back with this.
I have a question.
Yes.
Rich Opie, Purchasing Manager for Cuyahoga County. This item was walked on for this particular meeting. My director wrote an email. She couldn't be here today. That's Lenore Lockett, the Director of the Office of Procurement Diversity. And she said, regarding the attached walk-on alternate procurement, OPD should do its standard role of issuing a request for bids and receiving bids for this alternate procurement. There's no time savings by doing it otherwise. So OPD can step in and offer a formal and competitive RFB process, request for bid process.
Well, that's what and maybe I should have went through this. We are going to have OPD do the advertising of the public bids, receive the bids, open the bids, create the tabs, review for accuracy, and then submit it up to us. From there, we're just going to take it and run. So on Wednesday, I fine-tuned it a little bit from our initial discussion. Once again, was something we were trying to put together kind of quickly. But, the key thing here is, cutting the bidding time down and sending out the contract and the bid together. Hopefully we can go ahead and speed this thing up a little bit. I do have one staff that I'm going to put 100% on this. I know we have a multitude of contracts going through with you guys as it is already. That was another reason why I was trying to utilize my staff to help, get this thing done more timelier.
May I have a follow-up?
Tom Pavich, Public Works here. So under the rec is 42402. As Mike said, we're trying to expedite this process. My years of purchasing dating back in the private sector and sourcing, this is, I think, one of the most transparent and inviting bids that I've seen at the county. And the reason being, as Mike said, we're going to release this in the plain dealer. So everyone, just like a standard formal bid where the plain dealer is going to get this, we'll be working with you guys. The release time, it's actually going to go through buy speed. A standard formal bid, the only thing that's in buy speed is the public notice. The vendors would have to then call into OPD to actually get the formal bid. This type of bidding process through buy speed, everything is going to be in buy speed. They're all going to get it at the same time. They're going to get the actual bid package, the specification. When we're working with Anka Davis, our attorney, she's going to craft up the contract. The contract's actually going to be released at the exact same time. And we're also going to identify the required documents. So when this goes out through buy speed, we're also going to create a plan orders list as with a formal bid. We're going to look to identify vendors that have bid in the past, whether they've won bids, lost bids, and other interested vendors. But by releasing through buy speed and attaching that bid specification, whereas just the public notice is attached, the actual bid package is going to be sent out at the same time. So every single vendor, like for electrical, for example, when we send that bid out through buy speed, 47 vendors, they got that bid package. If they were to do a formal bid, 47 vendors would only get the public notice. They would be responsible for calling OPD, getting the big package sent to them. But if they don't get the bid until a couple days before the close time, At this point, with this process, they're getting it all at the same time. So they're going to have a full 15 days, 2 weeks in a day, for 15 business days, that they could actually do their own sourcing, do their own, profit margins, determine that. They're all going to get it at the same time. So it's actually extremely transparent. It's consistent. And that's one of the other reasons we're taking this. And then, as Mike said, we have one person that's fully dedicated to this project. She's committing about 90% of her time. So she's pretty much every day working on this project. So she'd be the one quarterbacking the bid specifications, releasing the bid package.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none? Mr. McAleer looks like he might have a question.
If approved today, when do you think the contracts will come forward? About 3 weeks from today, or?
We're hoping by the end of the week to get our first few out there, so early next week. We're going to hopefully we'll have these things moving, working with these guys, getting our dates. So I would say 3 weeks if we can get it, our first one. I would end up walking it on the Wednesday pre-meeting, hopefully, to try and expedite it. So 3 to 4 weeks. That was our goal.
The intent is when the bids close, we have to work with OPD, obviously, for the public notice. We'll develop an actual due date. Formal bids are usually due at 11 o'clock. They would close and go to OPD. The expectation and assumption is we would have someone at OPD create that tab sheet immediately. We would actually get it. And hopefully, we could actually get the contract submission the same day it closes. And as Mike said, we would expect the walk-on just due to time constraints.
Thank you.
Now, sorry, one last thing. They won't all come at the same time. We're picking out our main ones first, but we're going to come up to 8. We'll try and do 3 or 4 as soon as we can, and then keep coming right after.
Thank you.
So OPD is releasing these bids through BuySpeed?
No, Public Works would release the bids. Public Works would release the bids, but the bids would close and be submitted to OPD at the 11 o'clock hour. As I believe OPD can only submit the tab. They're the only ones that could create the actual tab sheet. So they would close at OPD's wall clock, just as a normal formal bid. And at the same time, after it closes, tab sheet would be created, sent to us. We would take the bids, evaluate them a little bit further, and then get a contract submission. So Public Works would release the bids, but they would close going to OPD.
Because it's a little unorthodox, we'd like to be involved with you before they're released.
We will, Rich.
Well,
Thank you.
Because the public notice, you guys have to release the public notice.
Okay. Anything else? I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just say for clarification, approved as amended, the requisition number has been amended to reflect the requisition number as 42402. Next item, item BC 2018-208, Department of Development, recommending an alternate procurement process which will result in a grant award to First Suburbs Development Council in the amount not to exceed $200,000 to subsidize the first year cost of 6 suburban pilot communities that selected CitizenServe code enforcement software through a competitive process in connection with the First Suburbs Regionalized Code Enforcement Pilot Program.
Good afternoon. Ken Sarad with the Department of Development. This is, I'm seeking approval of the alternative procurement for this code enforcement pilot software. The actual agreement's being finalized now. This is just the first step, and I'll come back to you soon with once that's finalized. Excuse me. But since 2013, many of the first-ring suburbs have been looking for solutions to improve and best practices to improve their code enforcement practices through the First Suburbs Development Council, 6 communities: Cleveland Heights, Lakewood, Parma, Shaker Heights, South Euclid, and University Heights. So they call themselves the Coalition of the Willing, have come together to actually took the step forward to adopt a common system, CitizenServe, which again was done through a competitive process. What the grant would be for is really kind of capacity building, allowing these communities to implement this in a more cost-effective way, and then all ongoing costs would be on their own. The one thing I do want to share is this will be paid out of the Real Estate Assessment Fund. It's a special fund, and why that can happen is because a major component of the software system is helping to create a more standard permit and permit process, and that is used in the appraisal process. So that's why that special fund could be used for this. Ideally, what we'd love to see is more communities joining on through the agreement with CitizenServe. Excuse me, any communities that want to join on will be done at the volume discounted rate. So they could have benefits for other communities going forward as well.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Oh, wait, is there a question?
Just one comment, Mr. Chair. Just the backup has Councilman Harrison listed for the two cities. If we can just change that to Councilman Hauser.
I will make sure that's updated.
Any other questions? Councilman Miller.
Just a comment that this seems to be a step toward a unified county-wide code enforcement process, which is one of the things that's come up in the housing plan and from the advocates and from people talking about how to reduce foreclosure rates and improve housing conditions. So it's a positive development.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. McAleer.
If other cities wanted to join moving forward, would there be other additional funds for the startup, these cities?
We could discuss that. This is being seen as a one-time currently, but if there are a handful of others that want to, I think I would need to talk to the fiscal department and make sure the funds were available, because we are doing the mass appraisal now.
Anything else? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you. And we're now on the items in the consent agenda, 209 and 210. Any questions on the consent agenda items? Seeing none, I move to approve the consent agenda items. Is there a second?
Second.
Very good. I'll give that one to Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Items on the consent agenda item are passed. Any other business?
No other business at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment?
No public comment at this
I
time.
move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.